Hello everyone. Today we're going to look at replicating the sort function on the list data type. We're going to cover a few other pretty useful concepts as well, like converting a char array to a string and vice versa, so a string to a char. We'll also cover ternary operators and overloaded functions. So in the midst of this logical breakdown, we're going to throw in some really useful and powerful tools to add to the programming toolkit and cover some new topics. So let's get started with what I have on the screen. To save myself a little bit of time, I kept the code that I'm planning to write. I kept some of it. All we've done here is we're using the form load event. This is kind of like the main function. You can create that by just double clicking the form. This is the first thing that runs when we load the form. So this runs immediately when I click the start button. There are a couple of other things that run before it. I believe this runs first, then this runs, but we don't need to get into the weeds of that yet. So I press start, form 1 runs, then form 1 load runs. The first thing we see here is the initialization of two char arrays. So these are going to be the ones that we're going to sort. We're going to compare these two char arrays. Here I've created a string list using these two char arrays, and right here is how I converted to the string. So you'll see here I have string 1 inside of this new keyword, string parentheses, and then the value. So this is how we convert from a char array to a string. I did the same for the second char array. And then we'll see here I did the same but in reverse. So here we have sort, which is going to take a char array, and I took the list value of this string list here, denoted by the zero-based indexing here. So we're taking this value here, which is currently a string, a string, and I'm converting it back into a char array just to show a simple way to convert between the two. I also did it with the second list value with the index of 1. And I have these set up just to show our functions when we've finished writing them. You'll see that I've already named my function sort. That's what our function is going to be named. So without further ado, let's get started. So first thing I'd like to do is create a string list return value. We are building the function prototype. We are going to take toString. We're going to take two strings. We're going to compare them. So the first thing I want to point out here is this underline will go away when we develop a return value. So we're trying to replicate the sort function. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about string list sort right here. This is what we want to replicate. So let me put that right up here. We are replicating a simpler version of it. Right, this will take multiple values. We're just doing a simple 2 value. Gets a little bit trickier adding multiple values. The first thing I need to do is I actually need to know which one's longer, because we're going to do a for loop, and I can't do a for loop if I'm looking at two index values. I can only use the shorter value of the two. So I actually need to create a for loop based on the length of the shorter of the two values. And I'm going to use a ternary operator to do that. What is a ternary operator? It's an if-else. So as I'm typing it out here, I will explain it's an if-else though. So I'm saying my value is going to become length. This is my if-else statement. Val1 less than val2. If val1 is less than val2, return this value. Denoted by the question mark, this is what we are going to return. We're going to return val1's length into the length variable here if it's true, else return this value. So this is our if statement. If this is true, return this value to length, else return this value. So that sets up our length and our for loop. Let me grab that. So here's our for loop. We're just going to use I for index. We're going to use this new length variable. Remember, we're going to index into these strings, but I can only index based off the shorter one. That's why we did this. We're going to get index out of bounds if I use the longer of the two. So now an important detail for developing this the logic of this sort. Inside our for loop, we are building the logic that's going to be very useful for our sort function here. So to do that, I need to analyze the ASCII code values of each part of the character arrays here. So I'm going to look at the value of this first value and this first value, and we're going to compare them. And how are we going to compare them? We're going to look at the ASCII code value. So in this case, we would be comparing 72 by 101, which would mean that we're actually looking at something. This is going to be a problem. So the way the ASCII code table works is you have a grouping of your capital letters and a grouping of your lowercase letters. So to correctly evaluate them the alphabetic nature of two characters, they both need to be either uppercase or both lowercase. In this case, I'm just going to use uppercase for both of them. And you'll see that the ASCII code value becomes 69 here when it was 101 here. Very important detail because you can see I'm going to do a numerical comparison. I'm going to do something very similar to here, except rather than dot length, I'm going to use the index value. I'm going to say val1 index 0, which will be 72, val2 index 0, which would have been 101, but I'm converting it to 69. You can see that that flips the Boolean. In one case, 72 is less than 101, but in this case, 72 is greater than 69. So it makes a difference in this case if I use only uppercase letters or not. And then the nuts and bolts of our code here, which I'm going to copy and paste over here. So here we have, I'm using this character function to compare and convert the first, in this case, whatever I is going to be 0, it's going to loop through the entire length of whichever string is shorter based off of this. And then we do a comparison. We're going to be comparing ASCII values here. C# does an automatic type conversion for us with this Boolean operator here, which is really nice. This is an automatic type converter. So it's looking at rather than looking at the ASCII character, we're actually looking at the number here. And then we can convert this to its ASCII number. And we're looking at 72 compared to 69. If they were the same value, this code would not run, or this code would not run. So all I've done is I the if and the else if here both perform the same comparison, with the exception of this is less than and this is greater than. And if this is less than, that means val1 is alphabetic in front of val2. So in this case, if 72 was less than 69, if 72 is less than 69, it's not. So in this case, val2, 72 is greater than 69. Therefore, val2 is going to be put in front. So here we have ELLEO, so it's just hello without the H, being put alphabetically in front of HELL, which makes sense alphabetically. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. E comes before H, so we would return this value here. Now we also need to handle the case where something like val1 equals AT, val2 equals attic, right? So these are always, none of these will trigger here, right? The loop will just end because they're always going to be equal. Here I'm looking for when they're not equal. These are always going to be equal. So to handle that case where they're not equal, I'm going to write one more return statement right outside of our for loop. So I added one more return statement right outside our for loop here. It's another ternary operator, just like we did up here for the length, where I'm going to return either what's in between the question mark and the colon or what's after the colon. So we're going to return one of those two. In this case, I'm doing a comparison of I'm doing the exact same comparison as up here actually. If length is less, if the length of val1 here is less than the length of val2, return this first one, else return this one. And the reason we're doing that is because the shorter value always comes alphabetically first. You could verify that with a dictionary if you'd like, but the lesser length, if they match, is the one that comes alphabetically first. So that handles the case where they match. So this sort function should handle all the cases where we compare two strings. If you find that I've overlooked something, please let me know. I would appreciate hearing that. And then the last thing we'll do is overload this sort function. We're going to overload it. What does that mean? That means we are going to reuse the name here to use the char array values. Remember here we used string values to compare against. Now we could also use the char array values. And what's really convenient about that is all I have to do to overload this function to allow for char array inputs to create a string list. It's still going to return a string list, but it can now accept char array values. And so that's the difference between these two functions. This function takes two char arrays. This function takes two strings, which allows me to reuse the name. It's called function overloading. And all I need to do to overload this function is call this sort function. I can just call this sort function with these values being converted into strings. As we showed earlier, it's very easy to convert char arrays to strings. So here I'm able to convert these char arrays into strings, and that makes it really easy to overload this sort method. So now that we've overloaded the functions, let's run this code and see what it does. I've created some breakpoints so we can see the value of string list as we're going through the code here. So I do want to walk through the code. This video is going to be a bit longer than my typical, but let's go through the code once. So here we have string list being assigned. String list has already run this code. So that's where we got this value, hello exclamation point or LO exclamation point. So we've created this string list because we converted the character arrays up here. And now we are going to run through our overloaded function. So we're going to use the debugger step into. And you'll see that we got thrown into the one with the 2 character arrays because we sent in 2 character arrays as the parameters here. And now we're going to call the other sort function, which has all our logic, converting the character arrays into strings. So now we have 2 strings. They're no longer character arrays. We're going to do our ternary operator here to grab the length of whichever one is shorter, in which case that would be val2, which is 5 characters. ELLO is 4 plus 1 for the exclamation point is 5. And now we are going to step through our for loop. We are going to look at val1 index I is 0. So it's going to look at H and compare it with, cool, we can see it right here. We are comparing these 2 values here. Char ToUpper returned. So the ToUpper function is just converting our ASCII code and our character to uppercase. You can see here it's showing the conversion here, just like we expected. So now this statement already assessed to be false. Now we're going to assess this statement here. This one will return true. What's inside the else if will return true, so we will enter this block of code. And from here, we are going to then return our string list in a new order. Now val2 will be in front of val1. And here, it's returning to this value, so this is now going to be returned back to the caller, which was string list here, the sort function. And this should modify our string list to put ELLO in front of hello. There you go. And you can see here, we've corrected the alphabetic sort. And we're just going to step over now. We're not going to step into the functions. So I've zeroed out string list, and I just want to show that the other function produces the same result where we send in 2 strings. And here we also get ELLO, HELLO. Even though we sent in string 1 first and string 2 second, it still switched them. And then my form pops up, but there's nothing on the form. I just used form load event to run the code immediately when I press start. It's an easy way to just run some code that doesn't have any controls. So yeah, we also covered the form load event too. But yeah, that's everything I'd like to cover in this video. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking to the end with me here. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.